Welcome to episode 32 of the Gospel Culture Podcast. On this episode, I had the opportunity to sit down with my good friend Dave Odom and ask him questions and listen to the story of his conversion. Dave is the lead pastor at Redeeming Grace Church in Franklin, Tennessee, a Sovereign Grace Church, sister church to Living Hope Church. He spent the weekend, he and his family, at my house last weekend, where he preached on our live stream at Living Hope Church as we suspended services during this COVID-19 pandemic. He preached a wonderful sermon on Psalm 23. If you'd like to hear that sermon, you can go to our website, Living Hope Church, PA, like Pennsylvania, livinghopechurchpa.com, under the Sermons tab, and there's actually a video you can watch as well. All right. Let's get into my conversation with Dave Odom. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Ben.
So we've been hanging out for the past couple of days now. First time in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, right?
Yes, sir.
What's your impression? What do you think? Is it everything you ever dreamed of?
Well, I've been looking forward to coming to Harrisburg for a long time, ever since we became buddies in the Pastor's College. And though the circumstances of this weekend have been less than ideal, it's been a joy to be here, for sure.
Did you enjoy Hershey World, as you like to put it?
Your wife did not like it when I called it Hershey World. She got a little defensive.
Yeah. It was Chocolate World, so singing cows. I mean, you traveled all the way from Franklin, Tennessee for singing cows.
It was a lot cheaper than Disney World, buddy.
That's true.
It was a nice little ride.
And it shows.
And they give you free chocolate at the end.
Your kids were so excited about free chocolate.
Who's not?
I mean, like, legitimately, like, there is chocolate happening. It was a little Hershey's Mini.
Yeah.
At the end.
Yeah, it was special.
It was good. So I've been wanting to have you on my podcast for a while now because you're one of my dearest friends. And I want to start having conversations with you here. I like having conversations with people I like talking to.
Yeah, we have lots of conversations. They're just not always recorded.
Lengthy, long, many, many hours of conversations. So let's bring some of that conversation onto here.
Let's do it, buddy.
So tell us about your current role, what you do as a pastor, how you got started doing that, and tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
That's what I'm here for.
The lead pastor at Redeeming Grace Church in Franklin, Tennessee, which is about 12 to 14 miles south of Nashville. And and we planted the church 7 years ago.
Sovereign Grace Church.
Sovereign Grace Church. We were planted out of Cornerstone Church in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Bill Kittrell.
Loved those guys. Craig Cooper was a full-time pastor there at the church.
Is that right?
Went bivocational to come on the church plant, and Howard Varnadoe, who was previously a full-time pastor at the church in Knoxville, who had relocated his family to Nashville and took a job there, and was serving as an elder at Ray Ortland's church, Emmanuel Church in Nashville. Yeah, one of our favorites.
Ray Ortland Jr.
I know. We say we were planted by Cornerstone Church of Knoxville and Emmanuel Church. That's how
beautiful.
Well Ray Ortland loved on our church. But so we planted with Howard, Craig, myself, and 7 years later the church still stands.
Wonderful. And we went to Pastor's College together.
We did.
2011 and 12, and you were preparing to plant that church all during that year.
That was the early stages of it. It honestly, that year, buddy, we weren't sure. I mean, we came to the Pastor's College with the dream of planting a church with Sovereign Grace. We'd always wanted to be a part of Sovereign Grace. You hadn't
been in a Sovereign Grace church before, right?
No.
Southern Baptist guy.
SBC guy. I'd never even been to a Sovereign Grace church on a Sunday morning until we arrived at the Pastor's College. And honestly, that whole year, I mean, it was a dream for us, but we never knew if it would actually become a reality. And that was kind of a season of not only us getting to know Sovereign Grace, but Sovereign Grace getting to know us.
Yeah,
and
sure.
And we had no guarantees that, we would be a guy that they thought would be qualified to plant a church. I didn't know that I was qualified to plant a church.
Right.
Church
planting sounded hard. You had been a pastor
hard.
for some time before that.
I had, for a number of years. And Yeah, so I have my wife of 18 years, Mary Beth, and we have 4 children. Anna Grace is 15, Jackson's 13, Hudson's 10, and Jude is 7. And
my kids have loved playing with your kids.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Couple days.
It's been fun to see. I mean, you and I and Kate and Mary Beth, we've had a close relationship over the last 8 years, but our families have not been together fully since we left the pastor's college in 2012.
So, you did not arrive into the world as a pastor. You became a pastor at some point, and there was a whole lot of stuff that happened before that. So, what would be wonderful is for us to be able to hear your testimony, how it is you came to faith, a little bit about your background, because there's some similarities there for us between the two of us,
right?
And how you became a Christian, and then how you became a pastor. So what was your upbringing like? What was your childhood like? How did this all start? You were born. I know that.
Yeah. Does anyone come out of the womb a pastor, Ben? Because the way you phrased the question had me wondering.
Might have met one or two.
Okay. Yeah, I might know those guys as well. I was born Montgomery, Alabama. My parents were not believers, not a Christian home. The first time I ever stepped inside the walls of a church was when I was 20 years old.
Yeah. Wow.
And so, my parents divorced when I was 9. My mom remarried pretty quickly thereafter, a guy who was in the military. And so my home went from kind of very unstable but relaxed, and then it went to very controlled and it was tough. It was tough. And so my stepfather was really, really strict. I'd be with him, and then I'd go spend the weekend with my dad, and we didn't even have a curfew on a weeknight at age 12. So it was just 2 stark differences, and yet it was kind of there. I never felt stable or secure in either environment. And so that was kind of my all the way up through.
You're with your brother, right?
Yeah, I have a brother that's 3 years younger than me. He and I, when you go through a lot of that abusive home, neglectful home, we bounced around between both parents. You really forge a bond together.
For sure.
Kind of almost out of a sense of survival of sorts. So we became very, very close, and in many ways kind of helped each other, even to kind of get through those years together. So, so never been inside of a church. I think I'd maybe heard the gospel before. Matter of fact, I now that I'm saying that, I was living in Colorado Springs. My stepfather was in the military. We got stationed in Colorado Springs. So I moved to Colorado Springs in 8th grade. And so I'm in Colorado Springs basically from 8th grade through 11th grade. And I was playing basketball. My brother made the decision, I'm going to go back to Alabama and live with our dad. I didn't even know that was an option for us. And so I was like, oh yeah, I'd rather do that too. But we're ranked in the state in basketball, and I kind of like to see this thing through.
You're an athlete.
I was. And so I wanted to wait until the season was over. So we finished the season. This was my junior year. And my basketball coach, who had coached me from 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and would have coached me all the way through graduation, he asked my mom and my stepdad, if it would be okay if he came over to our house for dinner one night. And it was the last night that I was in Colorado before I was moving to Alabama the next day. And so we had dinner, and then he asked, hey, could we go chat in the living room? And so we went and sat in the living room. African-American coach, single, in his probably late 30s, early to mid 40s at that time. I don't know exactly how old he was, but he said, I usually wait and do this and talk to the guys when they graduate. But because you're moving, I wanted the opportunity to share with you the hope that I have in Jesus Christ. And he started sharing the gospel with me. It was the most uncomfortable I'd probably ever been in my life, because I just didn't know Christians.
Had you ever heard the gospel before that?
No. And honestly, Ben, I don't know that I even heard it that night.
Yeah.
Because I was just so...
It came into your ears, but...
Yeah, right.
So had you heard about Jesus? Did you have any category for who Jesus was? I mean, Alabama, that's a pretty Christianized area, right?
Yeah, that's what
but
you
not your
you
home.
people in Pennsylvania just stereotype us Southerners
Well,
as
I
if
got a couple more if you want. I can go stereotypes
Southern
with Alabama.
Yeah. The War of Northern Aggression. Here we go.
I didn't think we were going there, but
no,
okay.
I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing.
So, but this was the first meaningful time that someone had talked to you about Jesus then?
Yeah, it was the only time.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no categories for. I mean, I knew the name Jesus, but it's not like I knew anything about him. And so for him to share that,
what was this coach's name?
Coach Baker, Wendell Baker.
God bless Coach Baker.
God bless Coach Baker. I actually called Coach Baker probably, I don't know, 15 years ago, just to say, hey, I don't know that you even remember me. You know, that was in 1990, and so I probably called him in 2008, somewhere around there. And I just wanted him to know that his faithfulness in sharing the gospel with a closed ear, hard-hearted young man bore good fruit, and that God watered that later in life. And now I'm a pastor.
Did he remember you?
Oh yeah, he did.
Beautiful.
It was sweet. It was really, really sweet.
Great. So you hear that, but it doesn't register.
No, not really. No.
Yeah, so you keep trucking.
I keep trucking. Yeah.
What happens next?
You want to know how I keep trucking?
Yeah.
So yeah, when I moved to live with my dad, I think that's when the rails really came off for me. I had too much freedom and no stability. It was just tough. I mean, we were in and out of houses. My dad, was doing his best, but he was, kind of a hippie holdover and very irresponsible. Couldn't hold on to money. Couldn't keep a roof over our heads. So he'd get us in a house. He was a real estate agent. He could get us in a house, but we couldn't stay in the house. So like he could, the lights would go out, and then, the water would be cut off. And my dad had found this water key. He had gotten a water key from a friend.
Unbelievable.
And so my brother wasn't strong enough to even turn the water on. So I would have to go out and flip the water key, the water main in the front yard for him to go to the bathroom or use the shower. And then I'd have to run back out and turn it off before the water company knew we were stealing the city's water.
I think everybody knows what that's like.
Right. Yeah. You might actually.
No, but I didn't even know there was such a thing as a water key. I'm like learning stuff.
Neither did I. So I mean, my dad would like go on road trips. Like we were like in high school. We didn't have a car, and he would go like on 2-week road trips, and we didn't know when he was coming back. There would be no food in the house. We had no way to get to school. We had no vehicle, and so like we stole food to eat. We bummed rides off of friends. We just figured out how to try to survive. And in the midst of that, we made tons of really, really poor decisions, and drugs, alcohol entered the picture. Yeah. And then like a sense of a new, different kind of sinful me arrived from that was very angry, who loved nothing more than to fight and to be violent. And so there was years of that, and then just, it was tough. And then finally one night, my dad came, and, we were out of the house again, and basically it was 7:00 on a Sunday night. And he said, boys, to my brother and I, we got to be out of the house by midnight, which we kind of knew, like the lights were out, we'd seen this party before. But this time he said, we're going to go stay with who was my stepmother. And, he said, but she said, we only have room for one of you. And Mike, who's my younger brother, he said, Dave, since your brother is younger, he's coming with us, and you need to find a place to live tonight. So I had basically 5 hours on a school night to find somebody to live with as an 18-year-old. And so, so that
so
led to
kicking around.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of similarity between our stories here as well, where when I was 17, I had to start finding a place to live and sleeping in basements, wherever I could.
Slept on the floor of buddies, on the foot of my buddies' beds, just on the floor.
Yeah.
I did a lot of that.
I would do that, and then my friends' parents, after a night or two, would often begin to wonder, what in the world is this weirdo teenager doing, sleeping at the house for multiple nights?
Right.
And then it would be over.
Yeah. Tough sledding for those homeless teens out there.
Oh yeah.
But
for real.
So that kind of went on. I was angry at my dad. He had he had let me down in a number of ways. I can go into detail if you want, but I just had bitterness in my heart towards him. I blamed him for my lot in life, even though I was making just so many poor decisions, and I wasn't becoming a responsible man. I wasn't taking, ownership of my life. I wasn't owning anything that I was contributing to.
Yeah.
So
you're smoking a lot of pot, right?
A lot of pot. Yeah.
That was how you handled it.
Acid and
Working,
shrooms.
right?
Yeah. Roofing houses. Yeah. That was tough work in Montgomery, Alabama in July.
I'll say.
When it's heat index of 120 and your shoes are literally sticking to the roof and yeah, that's tough work.
So you get to the age of 20.
Yep.
And things begin to change. Something dramatic happens to you, right?
Yeah, huge.
Tell us about that.
Life-changing. Yeah, so I had a girlfriend at the time. It was not a good relationship, but my birthday, it was my 20th birthday, and we were supposed to go out that night and have dinner or whatever. At the time, I was living in a single-wide trailer with 3 men who were in their 40s, all of them kind of strung out on crack. And I was sleeping like on the sectional sofa. I had nothing. I mean, I was destitute. Yeah. I mean, I would go days without eating. In the wintertime, it was hard to get jobs roofing, and they were sparse, and I wasn't doing well with money. And so Holly was my girlfriend's name, was kind of the only person I felt like there was a stable force in my life. And she canceled our plans for that evening. We actually had a job that Monday morning, and we were out on the job site, and the guys I was working with said, "Hey, I saw Holly out with some guy last night, just riding around town." And I was like, "Wait, what?" She told me she had to work. Yeah, dude, she wasn't working. Yeah. She was rolling through town with some other guy, and it wasn't you. And so
painful.
Yeah, it hurt. And so I called her. She came and picked me up. We went back to the trailer where I lived, and we were just kind of talking. She was apologizing, saying he's just a friend. We've heard that one before. And she's saying, "Please forgive
Biz
me."
Marquis told us all about that.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's the song I was referring to.
Sorry, go ahead.
I took us there. And so she for some reason didn't want to break up with me. I wasn't bringing much to the table in those days. And so but for some reason, and so I was just sitting there going, "Man, this stinks. I need time." So I basically tell her, "Just give me some time." She said, "Great, take all the time you need." She grabs the remote control, flips on country music television, and basically leaves me on the couch to just kind of figure out my lot. What am I doing? Am I going to break up?
And you being a big country music fan, this was a real blessing for you.
Yeah, I hate country music. You're enjoying this part of the story, aren't you?
Sorry.
No, that's great. No, I endured it for a few months while I was with her, and so I was living, I was sitting on this couch, which was doubled as my bed, looking into the kitchen, and in the kitchen there was a box of beer that we drank the night before, a Busch Light Draft. On the side of the box was a NASCAR advertisement, and the way that it was sitting in the box, in the way that kind of the bars that separated the living room from the kitchen, all you could see was the word car. And I was just kind of staring and just going, "Man, my life sucks." And
you're 20 right now, right?
I'm 20 years old.
Yeah.
20 years and 1 day old, because my birthday was the night before. And I'm thinking, this is about as low as it gets. And suddenly I hear this voice that is as clear as any voice I've ever heard in my life say, as I'm staring at this box, "If you trust in me, I will put away your sin." And it was just clear, like I'm looking at the box. It was just clear imagery for me that God was speaking to me, saying if I trusted in him, he would put away my sin. The box was representative of my sin. And then there was the second aspect to it that was really strange, and I didn't make much of in the moment. But I heard the voice also said, "And I will provide a car for you through your dad." And at that time, I hadn't spoken to my father in 2 years, hated him, everything that I said earlier, just stored up anger. And so I had no category for God, was not seeking after him, had no longing for him. And yet, here in this moment, I had no doubt whatsoever that the voice I had just heard was God. I mean, I never even questioned for a moment. I turned to Holly, assuming that that voice that I heard, that was as crystal clear as any voice I've ever heard speak, as if she had also heard it. And of course, she has no clue what's going on. And but she lived with, her mother was a missionary in Belize, Mexico, and she lived with her grandparents, and her grandparents were in their 80s, and her grandfather was a pastor at this Nazarene church in Prattville, Alabama. And so I assume, she told me she went to church on Sundays, hated it, never paid attention, wrote notes to her friends. But I thought, well, she's at least got some answers for me. Like, I hear this voice, I repeat.
Churches where you go to hear about God.
Right. Yeah, she can decode this puzzle that has just entered into my life. I've heard this voice. I see this thing. Maybe she's got some answers for me. And so I'm saying that to her, and she's looking at me like I've lost my mind, which, I probably felt that way.
Might never have had it. But.
Right. And so, I'm looking at her and just like, and I'm like, I feel, it was in that moment that I felt a sense of peace flood into my heart. And soft. My heart was very hard. I had not shed a tear probably in 5 years.
A lot of anger, right?
A lot of anger. Yeah. And in that moment, I was weeping tears of joy because I felt this beginning of this release of everything that I've been carrying. And I had no categories for what was going on. So, and she wasn't helping me. I mean, she's looking at me and going, so what about us? And I'm like, what do you mean, what about us? Like, she's like, are you forgiving me? Or are we breaking up? And I went, oh yeah, that's why we're here, right? Yeah, we're good. Yeah, I forgive you. Yeah, we're good. Yeah. And can I go to church with you on Sunday? She's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I want to go to church with you. Did you not hear God just spoke to me? I'd like to go check this out. And she just thinks I'm crazy. That all happens on a Monday. The next morning, her grandfather has a heart attack. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks. That's significant because when we go to church on that Sunday, the man that gets up to preach says to the congregation, as you guys know, Pastor Metters had a heart attack on Tuesday. The elders asked me if I would prepare a sermon for today. I spent 5 days preparing the sermon, but God woke me up at 3 a.m. and had me rewrite it for someone who's here today. So the moment I heard that, I immediately go, this is all a fraud. Like, somebody has alerted this guy who I am, what's happened this week. I turn to Holly. She's the only one that knows, assuming she's told someone that I'm coming and tries to set this whole thing up for me.
Yeah.
As if this whole thing existed.
But that wasn't the case.
No, she had no clue what was going on. Like, she was writing a note, and I was like, did you tell him? She was like, about what? And I was like,
I haven't had that experience yet as a pastor, getting woken up at 3 a.m. to write a new sermon.
Yeah?
Have you had it?
Nope. I have not.
But this guy did.
Praise God that he did.
Yeah. And it mattered.
And by the way, years later, when I was a youth pastor in college, I looked up this guy's phone number and called. He wasn't home. His wife was. And I said, would you please tell your husband, he may not even remember this, but I gave her the date. I said, your husband did this, preached. So he shares this message, and it's basically like he's reading my thoughts for the next 30 minutes.
Wow.
I wish I had a recording of it. It was surreal. And in that moment, I was just like, okay, this is real. God is real.
Wow.
And God is pursuing me clearly.
Yeah.
And so he gave an altar call at the end. No way I'm going up in front of all these strangers. I had no interest in that whatsoever. But then after the service, everybody was talking to Holly about her grandfather. And so we ended up sticking around for an extra few minutes. And I saw homeboy over at the water fountain, just preached his guts out, got no sleep, and nobody responded.
He's been up since 3.
Yeah, I felt compassion for the man. And so I thought I should at least go over and say hello.
Yeah.
And so I walk over and I said, hey, just wanted you to know, this happened in my life this week. There's no way you could have known those things other than the Lord speaking to you. And I just wanted you to know I'm that guy, and thank you. And he'd never batted an eye. He said, do you have a couple of minutes to chat? And I was like, sure. And he took me in a room, shared with me the glorious news of the gospel of Jesus Christ, how God had sent his son to come and to die in order that sinners might be reconciled through his blood. And he asked me if I wanted to be forgiven of all of my sins by placing my faith in Jesus Christ. And
Yes.
I just went, more than anything.
Oh,
and so this man prays with me, and I am converted that Sunday, my first time ever walking into a church. So that's where it all started.
Beautiful. And we really don't even have time to get into the many different people that God has specifically brought into your life, starting from, what was the coach's name?
Coach Baker.
Coach Baker.
We hit him. Yeah.
And just on and on. There are many stories of God's kindness to you by bringing men into your life to speak truth to you and care for you and strengthen you as a man.
Can I say one more thing before we move on?
Please do.
Because I even when I share the story with people, I always forget this part, and I just remembered it as we were moving
Glad you
on.
Remembered.
So about a month later, I moved out of the crackhead house, moved in with my aunt, and
that's a good idea.
And the phone rings. This has been about 6 weeks since I was converted, and it was my dad, who I had not spoken with in over 2 years, and he was wanting to chat. I had no interest. I was giving him one-word answers, just sending the signal, Dad, I have no interest in any form of a relationship with you. And when it was clear that he wasn't getting anywhere in terms of a conversation, he finally just said, Dave, I know you're angry with me and you have every right to be upset with me. I am very sorry for all that I've done. He said, I just called because I've gotten a job working at a car dealership, and they've given me a program car, and Brenda has a car, I have a car, I have this program car, we have an extra car, and I just wanted to know if you needed a vehicle.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The car part.
Right, like the kooky part that was
God
really
said
specific.
He would give you a car
through my dad,
through your dad,
who I hated and refused to speak to, and
and
so and that was glorious, not just in terms of the provision and this answer to this very specific thing. It was God's way of caring for me while I was in this wilderness state, but He was also restoring to me a relationship with my father that began on that phone call.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, so sorry for leaving that out on this.
No, it would have been bad if you hadn't added that.
I know.
We would have missed out on that whole car part.
It happens all the time. People will come up, like I'll share it at an event, people come up and like, so, or do you and your dad talk? Like, did you ever restore? I went, oh, I left out the car part. And they were like, oh, that happened?
Wow.
Yeah, sorry.
So how did you begin to sense a call to ministry?
Yeah, that's a good question. So 20 years old, converted. The second time I stepped foot in a church, I was 21. So it was another year before I found a church. And I just didn't know any Christians, and it took a while. Yeah. And once I got into the church, I was eager to catch up on lost time. I mean, I was just reading my Bible the best I could.
I was very similar. It took me almost a year to go back to church after I was born again.
Am I allowed to ask you questions on this podcast?
Sure.
So why did it take you a year? The reason it took me a year is because the only church that I knew was my ex-girlfriend, and I knew I couldn't go back there. So I didn't know anyone else who went to church.
So there's even more story there because you broke up with her and and all that. We won't get into that, but
it needed to happen.
For me, it was I'd grown up in the church as a kid, and I'd had some really bad experiences, some good, but basically I was convinced that the church was a corrupt institution that was out to extort money from people.
You would think that.
Yeah.
So
maybe some churches are. So
yeah.
But
so what did the Lord do to soften your heart?
Well, basically what He did was change my desires to the point where it began to be hard for me to relate to people that I was surrounded with who weren't Christians, and I didn't have Christian friends. And I began to think, hey, maybe I should go to church. Maybe there's people that'll understand the impulses that are
right,
and the changing desires that are happening. And I was a single guy, and I thought maybe those girls. And there was a girl.
I was going to say,
yeah, that's how I got married.
I think you put a ring on it, didn't you? Yeah. So yeah, for me, and that's funny that you said that, is because the only reason I end up back at a church is I asked a girl out, and I finally got the courage to ask this girl out who I'd been kind of seeing but hadn't met yet. And the first time I met her, I was like, "Hey, would you be interested in hanging out sometime?" She was like, "Sure. Would you like to come to church with me?" I went, "Oh, you go to church?" I just didn't know anyone that went to church. Yeah. And so when I got into that church, I just kind of soaked it all up. Around that time, I started college at the age of 22. So I turned 22 my first semester in college. I had to work for years saving up for lost time. I had a lot of debt and expenses that were incurred during those lost years. And so I was 22 when I started college, and I was just so zealous for the Lord. And there was only one campus ministry at my school, and I thought, I need to become friends with these people. And honestly, Ben, it was the hardest thing in the world because I had nothing in common with any of them.
Is that Middle Tennessee?
No, this is AUM, Auburn University at Montgomery. Okay. So this is Montgomery, Alabama.
Yeah.
And I mean, these were the kinds of people I'd spent my entire life staying away
from. Trying to avoid.
Yeah, I was like, oh, they're nerds. They're
not similar music tastes.
Oh gosh, no.
Movie tastes.
I'd never heard of Michael W. Smith. I didn't enjoy. One of the guys was he did magic tricks, and I was just like,
somehow I think the gospel is going to help you transcend all of that.
Well, fortunately, the Lord gave in me a desire to be around Christians, even those whom I, on the surface, seemingly had nothing in common with, and yet I knew instinctively I'm going to be better off if I find common ground with these people and start building with them. And so I did. It was a small group. It was like 10 people, 10 Christians on this campus that gathered.
So even the Michael W. Smith magic guy, friends.
We were acquaintances.
Were there any jugglers?
Friends are.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah, that's what he did.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, magic show, juggling. Yes. He started pulling other guys in. He thought, "Hey, you're an athlete.
Flaming
Would you be
batons,
interested?" No.
Mime ministry.
I'm not even joking. We had all of that.
Oh my.
Yeah, and this is the world. This is the Christian world I entered in college.
All of you are listening. This is the power of the gospel.
Amen.
Working right here, uniting.
The fact that I did not walk away from this group
across party lines.
That I did not just go join a fraternity and say to heck with all these.
Yeah, why else
Christians.
would you actually be a part of this?
Yeah, so the church that I went to, there were a couple of girls who were part of the college ministry who were at that part of that group.
Yeah,
and I mean they were just, they were kind people. They lived across the hall from me in the apartment that I lived in off campus, and so in many ways, their relationship with my brother and I, they were just encouraging us in our new walk with the Lord and my new walk with the Lord. And so I felt kind of indebted to them in many ways as well. And so, but what I discovered was this student center had incredible, they offered lunch twice a week for $1. They had a pool table. They had a ping pong table. They did intramurals, and they would pay for your intramurals. And I was like, and I finally, like, one day was like, hey, am I allowed to invite people over here? Like, I assumed that it would not be kosher, like, to invite their little club. And so they were like, are you kidding, Dave? You can invite us whoever you want. And at this time, I'm just zealous to reach people with the gospel. And so had a bunch of relationships on campus, had guys I'd gone to high school with that were in college there. And so I just started bringing all these lost friends over to this place and just kind of like, well, I'm not necessarily going to be great friends with these people, but I'm going to kind of bring these people along. And so what happened was very, very quickly, our ministry grew from like 10, and within the course of about a year and a half, it had grown to about 175 to 200 students. Wow. And yeah, it was awkward because I was a baby Christian.
But there was grace on your life.
People would have said that, yeah. And so the campus minister there, like, he was renaming like awards in my name. Like, it was super awkward. I'm a freshman.
The Dave Odom Award?
Dave Odom.
Oh my.
I can't remember what the category was, but it was like some kind of evangelism.
So I've decided to now live my life in a way to win that award. I don't know how that works. So
I don't think it exists. I think I protested
Maybe we need to resurrect
too much. I don't know. But anyways, so I mean, I just was in love with Jesus, and I loved people, and I wanted other people to get in on this, and so I was just inviting everyone, and the next thing I knew, I was being put in charge of everything because I was kind of the focal point of all these relationships. And so, and people start talking to me, like assuming that I'm a pastor and I'm going to be a pastor. And I'm like, I don't even know the Bible. And yet in the world that the evangelical circles I ran in, you didn't have to know the Bible to be a pastor. And so I was kind of thrust earlier than I should have been into some ministry spaces. And yet God was very kind and gracious to, in spite of me.
So tell me about John Piper.
Yeah, what do you want to know?
I want to know how John Piper actually filled you with a conviction about ministry and mission. How'd that happen? Because I know a little bit.
Yeah, so
it did happen.
Yeah, it did. So
God used John Piper in a certain way. How'd that work?
He used John Piper in a certain way in literally tens and tens of thousands of college students.
So this is at Passion, right?
Yeah, so
this is the seashells sermon.
It began even before that. So Passion began, I think, in either 96 or 97.
Okay.
And so it was always
just FYI, I'm smoking crack right then. So
congratulations.
I wish I was on your trajectory at this point, 96, 97, but sadly, no. I was a train wreck.
Well, we arrived.
FYI, I digress. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I had a bunch of buddies in Montgomery who had gone to the Passion Conference I think it was in Austin, Texas in 98.
Yeah.
And it was always over Christmas break, like right around New Year's. And they came back and they were just fired up. They were talking about Louis Giglio and they were talking about Chris Tomlin and Matt Redman and all these guys that were leading worship and speaking. And then I had a couple of friends that were like, there's this guy named John Piper, and he's preaching in a way we've never heard before.
Yeah, well, I know all about that. Yeah.
And
when I was a young Christian.
And so, I mean, this is in the 90s, so it's not like I can jump on the internet and just check out a Piper sermon. It's like, well, I'll go next year and I'll check it out for myself. Yeah. And so there's this kind of intrigue that had built by friends that I really respected. And so, yeah, so it's January 1st, 1999, Passion 99. It's probably the third or fourth conference they'd ever done, Fort Worth, Texas. And we'd taken a couple of dozen of our friends from college, and we'd gone to this conference. And Piper,
married at this point?
No, I'm not even dating. I kissed dating goodbye before Josh wrote the book.
Oh, jeez.
No, he literally had not written, or if he had written the book, I didn't know he had written the book.
Or maybe, and you could have written the book then.
Well,
maybe you should have written.
Let's just say when you live a life of licentiousness like I did for so many years,
it's good to be careful.
Well, yeah. So I tried to date as a young Christian, and I just discovered that it was not bearing good fruit in my life. Well, I just was like, I need to grow as a believer. I'd like to be friends with girls, but it's just not good for me to have relationships. So I basically went through college and just didn't date.
Just went in the friend zone.
I was glad to stay in the friend zone. Yeah, I was working hard to stay in the friend zone. So because I was an eligible bachelor.
Yes.
Man.
Oh, I know.
They had awards named after me. Crowds were flocking to the Baptist campus ministry.
Women clamoring.
That's right.
For just to touch the hem of your robe. So you're at Passion.
Yeah, so Passion 99. Wonderful conference. I'd never seen so many college students just passionately worship.
I've seen the video. It's unbelievable.
Passionately worshiping the Lord. I was in Baptist context where there just wasn't a lot of passion for the Lord.
Yeah. And
there was a seeming reverence for God's word, but there was a disconnect that was
not
there.
An emotional connection.
No, and it was kind of something. It was a box you checked more than a life that had been just ransomed by Christ. It was just given fully to him. And so just being surrounded by tens of thousands, I don't know, there was probably 20,000 at that conference.
A lot.
And oh my gosh. And I went, okay, this is like unlike anything I've ever seen. And so there was just this awakening in my heart, towards just not feeling like I needed to reserve myself in terms of my pursuit of the Lord.
So you felt freedom
for the first time. Yeah, honestly. So I don't know if it was the first night or it was probably the second night of the conference because Louis Louis typically preached that first message, but the second night, Piper gets up there, and he's this, everybody's young. I mean, Louis Giglio dresses like a 25-year-old, and John Piper gets up there in a suit, and he just doesn't seem like he fits in this crowd at all.
He's like 50 at this point, a little bit older.
Probably, somewhere around there, yeah.
So was this, is this out on the lawn?
No.
Okay.
No. This was in Fort Worth, in one of those auditoriums, one of the old auditoriums that they used. And so this was just a message, and he was preaching on the glory of Christ, the God-centeredness of the gospel.
Yeah.
And
I've heard that
he said the words that shook and rocked my world and made me hate him, and yet made me want to go to my Bible to disprove him, and I couldn't. But he basically was challenging college students, saying, Christ did not die for you. Christ died for the glory of God.
Yeah, the radical God-centeredness of the gospel.
That's the message right there, buddy.
Yep.
Yeah. And so
heard that one.
I sought to disprove him. I bought Desiring God.
Yeah.
And thought, okay, I'll get more into how his thinking, and I'll sit there with my Bible, and I'll disprove him. And the more pages I turned, the more I found, oh my goodness, I'm becoming a Calvinist, and I don't know any Calvinists, and so it was glorious. Yeah. And so fast forward, that was 1999. It was May of 2000 when the one-day conference in Memphis, Tennessee.
And this
happened.
is the one that's outside?
That's the Seashells.
That's the Seashell sermon.
And Mary Beth and I were sitting on that lawn that day.
So listen, if you've never heard this sermon, you can for free on YouTube. Google Seashells sermon, John Piper, and hold on to your seat.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, John Piper's most famous book is Don't Waste Your Life.
Yes, that's right. And that one actually, Don't Waste Your Life was the game changer for me at the outset of my faith. That's what made me want to take my faith seriously, was that book.
And that's been a lot of people's entry point to John Piper. But that book was essentially an exposition of a message he had preached a decade earlier to a group of college students whose lives were radically shaped and changed forever because of that one sermon and the way God used one sermon in the lives of an entire generation.
So Piper preaches, make your life count for the glory of God.
Amen.
In a very powerful way that you should listen to. You're on that lawn.
Yep.
You're with Mary Beth. So at this point, you're
dating.
You're dating.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You hear that sermon together.
Yeah.
What happens?
So get this. So we hear that message, and God is doing things in our hearts that is scaring us because we're worried about what giving our lives fully to God might mean for our relationship. Assuming that if either one of us is a little too radical, the other will want out. Yeah. And we felt like our relationship was headed somewhere, and yet we were fearful. And so she was a camp counselor at Camp Kanakuk in Missouri, which is a big Christian camp that they have. And she left from that conference and drove from Tennessee to Missouri. She actually had to leave early. So she left like a day before the rest of us left because she had to get there to check in. And she didn't have access to a phone that summer. And so basically we hear this message. John Piper drops a grenade into our lives. Yeah. And then she has to go, and I don't get to talk to her for basically 2 months. Okay. And so this whole summer, and it's funny because when we finally had a conversation and reconnected, we were both scared to death about what the other might think about how we were processing that message.
Because there was something radical happening in your hearts?
Yeah, we were ready to, we're young, naive, but we were ready to just give our lives to go to the ends of the earth. And that's how a lot of people, when they first heard that message.
There are many testimonies from that one sermon.
Yep.
Significant testimonies of people saying we're just all in with Jesus.
Yep.
And we're going to give ourselves to his mission and his cause.
Yep. We're ready to die for the cause of Christ, no matter where that takes us.
And you were one of those couples.
Yes. And we were individually that. And so when we had the conversation, it was just a sense of relief. It was like, oh, you're ready to give all of this, your whole life for this.
Oh, wow.
And so it was
so
wonderful.
There was a meaningful connection at that point.
That's when I put a ring on it. It was like, okay, yeah, we're on the same page here.
Beautiful.
And so, but I had a keen sense of a lack of theological training. And so I knew none of my friends were really, I had a couple of friends that were headed towards seminary, but most of them, they were just taking ministry jobs. They didn't have seminary degrees, but I knew like I needed theological training. If I was going to go on the mission field, I needed help. And
so your plan initially was overseas?
I mean, that we
just whatever it takes.
Yeah, that's what we communicate. My dad
to the nations, potentially.
Exactly. Yeah. My dad still talks about, like, he just assumed we were headed to Africa after seminary, and then he'd never see us again, because that's how we were. This is what
zealous.
We were willing
you
to
guys
do.
Were zealous.
Yeah, and so it was in seminary as we were getting theologically trained, and that the Lord began.
What seminary
really
you go to?
Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas. Actually.
Yeah. So you come out, you get a job as a pastor, right?
Yeah. So God did some things to clarify a sense of calling in those years there in seminary. One of the most helpful things was my first year. I became friends with a lot of students who were clearly called to the mission field, and I saw the difference. And I was taking Greek, and I noticed a desire and a zealousness for learning languages that those who were truly called to go to the mission field and to learn a new language had.
Yeah.
That wasn't there for me. And I had a professor kind of pull me aside, and even I had met with him. He was a former missionary, and I was just like, I don't love learning a new language. Is this a problem? And he was like, it kind of is. And the president of the International Mission Board came to chapel one day, and the big joke was whenever he came, students skipped out on chapel because essentially what he did was try to call everybody to missions. And so everybody who wanted to just be a pastor or youth pastor was afraid to go to chapel because the God might call them to the mission field. And so, and I'm still trying to discern what's God doing in my heart. This is my first year in seminary, and he preached one of the most freeing messages I've ever heard. And he said, I know your reluctance to come and hear me. And he said, here's what I'm here to do. I'm not here. He said, what I want to see is American pastors with a passion to see the glory of God spread to the ends of the earth.
Oh, wow. We
We don't need more guys becoming missionaries. We need pastors to pastor churches that have a vision for the glory of God.
Do you know this guy's name?
Jerry Vine. No, not Jerry. He was the former IMB guy before David Platt.
I don't know. Not trying to trip you up.
No.
But man, is that good counsel.
Oh, it was so wonderfully freeing.
And clarifying.
It was so freeing because we were just wrestling with it, with a sense of the fact that, we're that's the only way to live fully on mission for God.
Right. This is how we express our zeal for the Lord.
Right.
Going to the nations.
Yeah. So anyways, I'll need to look up his name later.
Which we love.
We do.
Going to the nations. But not all of us are called to do so. And that clarified that for you.
That is correct.
Yeah. So you begin to adjust your thinking a little bit.
Yeah, I became passionate about theology. I became passionate about ecclesiology.
Yeah.
I had no framework for the local church, the context. I was in a campus ministry that basically served as my local church.
Yeah.
And my friends from college were beginning to fall away from the Lord because they had no
commitment to the local church.
None whatsoever. Yeah. And once the relationships of college were kind of spread abroad to different places, and people were getting married and moving and taking jobs. They had nothing to anchor their faith, and I had a youth pastor in our town really challenge me about what we were building at our campus ministry, and were we building something that could last? Because, I mean, what we had built, we thought, we were kind of like the model in the state of Alabama among BCMs. Like, we had guys coming in to find out the secret recipe of what we'd done to go from 10 to 200.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And yet there were men who would have looked at that and said, yeah, you're not building something that's sustainable. And he was right. And so
once again, God provides a man to help bring guidance and care for your soul.
That's another story for another day, but that was God. God sovereignly did something. I had the opportunity to get together with him. He's now at a church just north of Nashville, and he and I were able to grab lunch last year. I hadn't seen him in 18 years. But so just growing with a desire, increasingly becoming reformed in my theology, but I'm in a denomination, and particularly a seminary, that is very Arminian. And so finding a Reformed Baptist church in the Southern Baptist Convention, they were few and far between, particularly in 2005 as I'm coming out of seminary. Mm-hmm. And so I looked and looked and looked and found this church who was looking to hire a college pastor. We had a desire to do campus ministry, but we wanted to do it through a local church. And it just so happened that this pastor was Reformed. The church, I wouldn't say was Reformed, but at least the senior pastor was. Yeah. And that was helpful. And so, so we moved to Murfreesboro, Tennessee in 2005.
So there's a whole bunch we could get into there, but we're not going to. We're going to jump ahead.
Let's do it.
To Sovereign Grace. So you begin to, you're a Southern Baptist guy, been a pastor for a while, thinking about planting a church now. Mm-hmm. Was there anything in particular that provoked your thinking about church planning, or how did it start to enter your mind that maybe you should plant a church and not just serve as a pastor at an existing church?
So I will confess that I'd read some church planting books very early on. I'd read Darren Patrick's book. I'd read Driscoll. Some of his stuff on church planning, and I thought, if that's what a church planner is, I'm not in.
Understandable, actually.
Yeah. I was like, I don't think I'm an entrepreneur.
The Patrick's book was more about the qualifications of a church planner, not so much about the mechanics or practicals, right?
Yeah, there was some stuff in there that I just had question marks
Confessions of a Reformation Rev.
Yeah.
That gave me pause. I'll put
it
that.
And I think because Driscoll and Patrick were a part of 829, and some of the rhetoric and things that I'd seen surrounding those guys at that time, I thought, if this is what a church planner is, I don't have a desire. So first of all, I didn't have a desire for it, but yet the Lord continued to put people in my life who kept basically asking me, would you consider planting a church in Nashville?
Was this partly because of the grace in your life when it came to connecting with people and mission and that sort of thing in the middle of your role as an associate?
Yeah, so we had built a campus ministry there at Third Baptist Church in Murfreesboro, and basically what was happening was, in honestly, Sovereign Grace Resources that had a lot to do with what was going on in our church and in our campus ministry, and it was just the resources were bearing good fruit, and we were
music,
Cross-Centered
Light by CJ, maybe,
absolutely,
that sort of thing, humility.
Gary and Betsy's marriage book. I was doing premarital counseling. I was basically officiating 8 to 10 weddings a year, and and so all these students were finding their spouses in our campus ministry.
What a great book, by the way. Can I recommend?
You can recommend.
Yeah. Love That Lasts.
Give us the plug.
I'm just going to say, if you haven't read Love That Lasts,
wonderful,
by Gary and Betsy Ricucci, please go onto Amazon and buy it immediately. If you're married or you want to ever be married, it is the kind of book that will change your marriage and serve you in so many ways I can't even express. Anyway, I digress. Go ahead.
No, I went back through it a couple of years ago, taking a couple through
our church. Kate and I are going through it right now.
And it's still serving us. And so basically we had over the course of 4 months, we had 8 different encounters and conversations with individuals solo, not together, who brought up this idea of church planning. And I just kept laughing and going,
so you weren't thinking that just in and of yourself. Others were saying,
yes.
What about you planting a church?
this is the only, I had no desire for this whatsoever. Like I said, it sounded appalling.
A self-generated idea.
No, they're quite the opposite. And I remember one Sunday morning I had preached while our senior pastor was on vacation. And I had preached a message, and I was standing out in the lobby afterwards just talking to members of the church as they came by. And there was this woman in her 80s. Her name was Ann Hall. And, I've been at the church now for about 6 years and had a relationship, but that wasn't my area. And so I didn't necessarily have a close relationship. But she was walking up to me, and she was shaking her head. And I went, "Oh no, it must have been bad." And I was like, "I'm so sorry."
Oh, I know that feeling.
Your lead pastor's coming back next week. And she said, "Dave, that was wonderful. It's time for you to go." And I went, "Oh no, it was really bad." And just trying to be playful. I knew what she was saying, but I was being playful. And she rebuked me. She grabbed my hand. She said, "No, Dave." She said, "I've been praying. And I have clearly heard the Lord say that it's time for you to go on."
Oh, wow. This is a Baptist.
We're cessationists, Ben.
Yeah, that's right.
We don't believe
in... We don't hear the Lord speaking that kind
There's
of
no
thing.
such thing as prophecy.
Oh, my. So you're listening.
Yeah,
you're attentive anyway.
Yeah, once she kind of opens that up, and we're like, okay, maybe we should, she's number 8 in 3 months. Like, wow. Where's this coming from? So... so that's when we started to kind of think, and what was happening was, and I really felt like it was going to serve our the local church that I served, I loved, and I saw my convictions and my ecclesiology changing, and I didn't feel like it served my local church to continue building the way I was building in this campus ministry that was really kind of diabolically different to the way that the church was building. And so what was happening was these college students were graduating, moving out of my ministry into our local church, and they were dying because what they loved about what we were doing, they couldn't find in our church. And that was hard for me because I didn't want to see them go to another church. And it was hard for my senior pastor. He was angry with me because, he blamed me for everyone leaving after they graduated. And so it was
all these things converge.
Yes.
What you're hearing and reading and enjoying from Sovereign Grace and what others are affirming and the restlessness about all of that converges together, and you say, "I'm going to plant a church.
I'm open to
I'll look into planting a church."
Yeah, again, I said that early in the podcast, like even in pastor's college, I was like, I'm not even sure I'm the guy, but if you think I'm the guy, I'm open to it. And so, so we were exploring with Acts 29 planting. We assumed, from everything I understood about Sovereign Grace, is they raised up guys from within and planted, which I loved. I loved the model. Yeah. I just knew that wasn't available to us.
Right, you weren't part of a Sovereign Grace church.
Right, as much as I would have loved to have been. And so we were in the process with Acts 29, and just in the 11th hour, we were just basically one last step before we were going to start an internship at a church in Nashville to plant in Murfreesboro. And in the 11th hour, an opportunity opened up with Sovereign Grace to begin exploring that.
Yeah. So I'm gonna save the actual church planting conversation for another time, because it bears some time to talk about. We should probably take a little time to talk about
what's our minute mark on the spot.
We're almost at an hour here.
Oh, I'm so sorry, listeners. If you've stuck with it, thanks for sticking around. You should know that the guy that hosts this podcast, Ben Krebs, is one of the most wonderful men I've ever known.
Oh, thank you.
And it is a joy to be with him.
So we'll just end with this.
You're the host.
Thanks. Appreciate that. So you did plant, and there's a great story there that God continues to write, and we'll talk about that on a future episode. But what would you say what is the primary thing that you enjoy about being a Sovereign Grace Church pastor and having planted a Sovereign Grace Church? What's right up there? So it doesn't be one thing, but like, what are the things that really you enjoy the most about this process of becoming a Sovereign Grace pastor and planting a Sovereign Grace church? Well, why? Why Sovereign Grace, and what do you appreciate? I'm assuming you do appreciate some things about Sovereign Grace.
Yeah. No, but
maybe I'm being presumptuous.
No, the only presumptuous part is that wouldn't take the podcast over the 2-hour mark if I sufficiently.
You got 2 minutes.
Okay. So Mary Beth and I regularly say this feels like a dream. Whatever expectations we thought of how good this could be, it's so far exceeded the highest of our expectations.
Why is that?
Sovereign Grace, the people of redeeming grace that bear the marks of sovereign grace, that were in many ways sown into them long before we planted a church. Many of these people, they bear the marks of the gospel. They bear the fruit.
Because you were planted out from another Sovereign Grace church, so there was
and we have
a number of people that had gospel culture DNA.
Oh, we have members of our local church who have been members of no less than 15 other Sovereign Grace churches around the country.
Wow.
And so people who moved to Nashville, and though they are new to our church, they bear the marks of the gospel. They're joyful, they're grateful, they're humble, they love to serve, they're a joy to pastor. They lean in eagerly to hear God's word preached every week. They're eager to apply God's word to their lives and to live in community with one another. And I'd been a pastor for years, and I'd never been a part of a church that was like this, much less pastored a church. And so it's unbelievable. We regularly pinch ourselves and say, God has been gracious.
And that is, I think you'd agree with me, purely and truly the result of centering our lives around the good news of the Lord Jesus Christ.
No question.
And the fruit that the gospel produces. So when I say sovereign grace, I don't in any way think of that as like a novel, like new idea.
No,
I'm just talking about New Testament Christianity.
Correct.
Talking about gospel-centeredness.
Yep. And that's what I love about Sovereign Grace, is there's a lot of that in Sovereign Grace.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more I want to talk to you about, and I hope we will.
Next pod.
Okay. We're going to do it again?
Let's do it again.
You promise? You got to make a promise. Not we'll see.
If you, the listener, have stuck all the way to this part, I promise you I will do another one.
They did.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
So here it is. All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Later. Well, thanks for listening to this episode, and thank you, Dave, for joining me for the first of, I hope, many conversations going forward. All right, stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon here on this podcast.